Claire was sitting on the cold floor of her house, holding an eviction notice in her trembling hands. The letters seemed to dance before her, blurred by the tears that insisted on falling. 48 hours. That was all she had. 48 hours to come up with $1,200, or she and her 2 grandchildren would be on the street, homeless, stripped of dignity, and without hope. She looked around the humble home where she had lived for nearly 10 years. The peeling walls, the sofa with springs poking through, the noisy refrigerator that stubbornly kept running. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. It was the only place in the world where Michael and Laura felt safe. And now, because of 2 months of late rent, it was all about to be torn away from them, as if it were worthless. Claire closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to control the tremor that was taking over her body. 52 years of life. 30 years working as a cleaner, calloused hands that knew every type of floor, every cleaning product, every dark corner that no one else wanted to touch. And at the end of it all, she hadn't even managed to scrape together a miserable $1,200 to keep a roof over her family's head. The sound of children's laughter came from the small room next door, where Michael and Laura were playing, oblivious to everything. They didn't know their grandmother was on the verge of collapse. They didn't know that in 2 days they could be sleeping under a bridge. Claire had promised her daughter, before she died, that she would take care of the children, that she would give them a decent life, and now she was about to fail miserably at that promise. She was just a cleaner. For 30 years, she had scrubbed the floors of hospitals, schools, and offices where important people walked without ever looking down. Her calloused hands knew every kind of dirt, but they had never known luxury. At 52, with 2 grandchildren to raise on her own, she could barely afford the rent. And now, time had run out. That afternoon, Claire was returning from the bank where she had tried, unsuccessfully, to get a loan. The manager had looked at her with that expression she knew all too well, a mixture of pity and contempt. "Mrs. Johnson, with no proof of steady income and bad credit, there's nothing we can do." She left feeling smaller than ever, as invisible as she had always been. She needed to buy a fever reducer for Laura, who was running a temperature. She walked into the neighborhood pharmacy, that low-cost place that was always crowded, with a flickering fluorescent light and the smell of disinfectant mixed with the sweat of tired people. The line was long, as usual. Claire took a number and stood there, her legs aching after a full day of scrubbing the floors of a commercial building. It was then that she saw the old man. He was a few places ahead of her in line, hunched over, trembling, with worn-out clothes and an unshaven beard. He looked like a homeless man, the kind who sleep in parks and beg for change at traffic lights. But there was something different about him. His eyes, though tired, held a disturbing lucidity, as if he were there observing everything, studying people, mentally noting every detail. When it was the old man's turn, Claire overheard his conversation with the pharmacist. "Sir, the total comes to $847. The man fumbled in his pockets with growing desperation, pulling out a few coins, some crumpled bills. I only have $50. Please, it's for my heart. The doctor said that without this medicine I won't make it through the night." The pharmacist sighed impatiently. "Sir, I understand, but I can't release it without the full payment." The old man clutched his chest, his face turning pale, his lips taking on a purplish hue. Claire saw the cold sweat beading on his forehead. She knew those signs. Her daughter had died just like that, with her hand on her chest, before anyone could do anything. The difference was that now something could be done. There was a medicine that could save that life, but it cost $847. Claire looked at her worn-out purse, where the envelope with her entire month's salary was tucked away. $1,200. It was everything she had in the world. It was the overdue rent. It was her only chance to avoid being evicted with her grandchildren. It was the difference between having a roof over their heads and sleeping on the street. She looked at the old man again, saw him tremble, saw the life draining from his fragile body. And in that impossible moment, Claire made the decision that would change everything. She approached the counter with firm steps, opened her purse, and took out the envelope. Her hands were no longer shaking. There was a strange clarity in her gesture, as if it were the only right thing to do in the world. "Please," she said to the pharmacist in a calm voice, "give him the medicine. I'll pay." A silence fell over the pharmacy like a heavy blanket. All eyes turned to the woman in the faded uniform. The pharmacist looked at Claire, then at the money, then at the old man. "Are you sure, Mom? It's $847. Claire nodded. "I'm sure. It's a life. It's worth more than any money." She carefully counted the bills and handed them over. The pharmacist processed the payment in silence, while other people in line whispered among themselves. The old man received the medicine with trembling hands and took it immediately, right there in front of everyone. Slowly, his breathing began to stabilize, the color returning to his face. He looked at Claire with tears in his eyes. I don't know how to thank you. You saved me. Please tell me your name, your address. I have to repay you." Claire shook her head firmly. "There's no need for any of that. You just need to be well. That's enough for me." She picked up her now much lighter purse and walked out of the pharmacy without looking back. She didn't want to see the gratitude in his eyes. She didn't want to think about what she had just done. She didn't want to face the reality that she had just thrown away her only chance of keeping a roof over her grandchildren's heads. Outside, Claire walked a few feet before her legs gave way. She leaned against the pharmacy wall, then slid down until she was sitting on the dirty sidewalk, and there, under the indifferent gazes of passers-by, she finally broke down. The tears came with force, along with deep sobs that shook her entire body. What had she done? How would she explain to Michael and Laura that they were going to lose their home because of a stranger? A woman who had witnessed the scene in the pharmacy stopped beside Claire. She didn't say anything, just took out her phone and started typing. Seconds later, she posted on social media, "I just witnessed something incredible. A cleaner donated her entire salary to save a homeless man's life. Now she's crying on the sidewalk because she's lost everything. This is the country I believe in." The post was accompanied by a discreet photo of Claire sitting on the ground. Claire didn't know it, but that photo was starting to circulate. First dozens of shares, then hundreds, then thousands. People commented emotionally, cried with her, called Claire a hero, an angel, but she knew none of this. All she knew was that she had 48 hours to find $1,200 that she no longer had, and that her only hope now was a miracle. She finally stood up, wiped her tears with the back of her hand, and started walking home. Each step was heavy, laden with guilt and fear. How would she tell Mrs. Davis, the neighbor who looked after the children? How would she look into Michael and Laura's eyes, knowing she had failed them? But even with all the regret, a part of her still felt she had done the right thing. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Oh, and comment below where you're watching from. We love knowing you're out there with us on this emotional journey. 72 hours earlier, Claire's alarm clock had gone off at 4:30 in the morning, as always. She opened her eyes in the darkness of the tiny room she shared with her grandchildren. Michael and Laura were still fast asleep, huddled together on a mattress on the floor. Claire smiled at the sight, as she did every morning. It was for them that she woke up before sunrise. It was for them that it was all worth it. She got up silently, her joints complaining from the effort. 52 years of hard labor took their toll. Her back ached constantly, her knees were worn from so much time spent scrubbing floors, and her rough, calloused hands could barely feel anything anymore, but she couldn't stop. There was no time for pain when you had 2 mouths to feed and rent to pay. Claire went to the tiny kitchen, no bigger than a closet, and started making coffee. Filtered water from a plastic bottle, cheap coffee grounds that went a long way. Sugar she kept in an old ice cream tub. While the coffee brewed, she set aside the bread left over from the day before, spread it with margarine, and placed it on a plate for the children. A simple packed lunch, rice, beans, and a boiled egg. It was all she could manage with the little she had. At 5:15, Claire left the house quietly, leaving a note for her grandchildren. "Good morning, my loves. Grandma has gone to work. Breakfast is on the table. Michael, remember to take Laura to school. Mrs. Davis will pick you up in the afternoon. I love you more than anything. Grandma." She always left a note. She always ended it with, "I love you," because you never know when it will be the last time. The 5:30 bus was packed, as always. Claire squeezed in among other workers, all with the same tired expressions, the same worn-out uniforms, the same deferred dreams. She held on to the metal bar and closed her eyes, letting the sway of the bus rock her thoughts. She thought of her daughter, Beatrice, who had died 2 years ago in a motorcycle accident. 28 years old, a whole life ahead of her, and suddenly she was gone. Beatrice had been a single mother, just as Claire had been. Michael's father had left when he found out about the pregnancy. Laura's father never even met his daughter, and now the children only had Claire, a poor, functionally illiterate grandmother with nothing to offer but love and hard work. But love doesn't pay the bills. Love doesn't put food on the table. And lately, even hard work wasn't enough. Claire's first job was at a public hospital where she cleaned the corridors, the bathrooms, and the operating rooms after procedures. She started at 6 in the morning and stayed until noon. It was 6 hours of heavy labor, the smell of disinfectant burning her nose, blood and fluids she preferred not to think too much about. The doctors and nurses passed her as if she were invisible. Some didn't even respond to her "Good morning." At 12:15, Claire took another bus to her second job, a public school on the east side of the city. There she cleaned classrooms, the always dirty children's bathrooms, and the playground where the kids played. This was her favorite job. The children always stopped to talk to her, called her Auntie Claire, and shared their snacks. She saw Michael and Laura in each of those little faces, and she imagined what it would be like if she could give her grandchildren a better life. At 6 in the evening, after another crowded bus ride, Claire arrived at her third job, a commercial building downtown. There, she cleaned empty offices, sometimes crossing paths with executives working late. They barely glanced at her, focused on their expensive computers and phones. Claire cleaned their desks, emptied trash cans full of wasted, expensive food, and wondered what it would be like to have so much you could throw it away without a second thought. She finished at 10 at night. One more bus. She would get home at 11 when Michael and Laura were already asleep. She would eat something quickly, usually the leftovers the children had left, take a shower, and collapse into bed. 4 hours later, the alarm would ring again. This had been Claire's life for 2 years, ever since Beatrice died. 14 hours of work a day, 6 days a week. And still, she could barely make ends meet. That Tuesday, 3 days before meeting the old man in the pharmacy, Claire came home to find the letter under her door. A yellow envelope with bold red letters. Eviction notice. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Dear Mrs. Claire Johnson, we are writing to inform you that due to non-payment of rent for the months of August and September, totaling 1,200 glans, you have 48 hours to settle the debt or vacate the premises. Claire sat on the old sofa, still holding the letter. 48 hours, 2 days. How could she possibly get $1,200 in 2 days? Her salary had just come in, but it was already spoken for. Electricity, water, gas, groceries, medicine for Laura's asthma, school supplies for Michael. After everything, exactly $200 were left over, not even a fifth of what she needed. She looked around the house. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. 2 tiny rooms in a forgotten neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Peeling walls, a leak in the ceiling, a constantly dripping faucet. But it was safe. It was theirs. Michael had his drawings hanging on the wall. Laura had her toys organized in a cardboard box. How could she take all this away from them? How could she explain that they would have to sleep at Mrs. Davis's house, or worse, in a shelter? Mrs. Davis was the next-door neighbor, a 65-year-old woman living on a meager pension. She looked after Michael and Laura while Claire was at work, never charging a penny, saying it was a pleasure to have the children around. She herself was poor, living in a house even smaller than Claire's, but she had a huge heart. When Claire told her about the eviction notice, Mrs. Davis held her hand tightly. "My dear, God won't abandon you. You're a hard-working, honest woman. You take care of those children with so much love. Something will work out, you'll see." Claire wanted to believe, wanted to have Mrs. Davis's unwavering faith. But when you're at your wit's end, when you work 14 hours a day, and it's still not enough, it's hard to believe in miracles. The next day, Claire went to the bank to try to get a loan. She waited in line for 2 hours, finally being seen by a young manager who barely looked at her while typing on his computer. Bad credit, no proof of steady income, no assets to offer as collateral. "Unfortunately, I can't approve the loan." He said it without emotion, as if he were declining a credit card application, not deciding whether a family would have a roof over their heads. Claire left the bank feeling smaller than ever. On the street, she saw her reflection in a shop window, a 52-year-old woman who looked 70, in a worn-out cleaner's uniform, worn-out slippers, grey hair tied in a simple bun. That's how the world saw her. Invisible, disposable, just one more among millions of poor people who worked themselves to death and still never managed to get ahead. She had 24 hours to get the money. She thought about asking for an advance at work, but she knew they would say no. She had already asked last month to buy Laura's medicine. She thought about selling the old TV, but who would buy that? She thought about borrowing money from acquaintances, but she didn't have any acquaintances with money to lend. Everyone she knew was as poor as she was. It was then that she needed to go to the pharmacy to buy a fever reducer for Laura, and there, in that tiresome line, under the flickering fluorescent light, smelling of disinfectant, mixed with the sweat of poor people, Claire witnessed something that would change everything. A ragged old man, trembling, with no money for his heart medicine. A pharmacist coldly saying he couldn't help. And an impossible decision that Claire would have to make. Michael was 9, too thin for his age, with his mother's large, curious eyes. He loved to draw, spending hours creating pictures of superheroes protecting his grandma. He always asked when he could start working to help out at home. Claire always replied, "Your job right now is to study, my love. One day you'll be someone important and you'll take care of grandma." She didn't want him to grow up like her, invisible and disposable. Laura was 7, small and frail, with asthma that got worse in the winter. She was attached to her grandmother, sleeping in her arms every night. She always said that when she grew up, she would be a doctor to take care of grandma. Claire would smile and nod, but inside, her heart would break. How could that child become a doctor when they barely had money for her asthma medication? How could you dream so big when reality was so cruel? These were the people who depended on Claire, 2 innocent children who had lost their mother and only had her, and now Claire was about to make a decision that could cost them everything. But sometimes, the difference between right and wrong isn't in the outcome, but in the choice. And Claire was about to make the choice that would define who she truly was. Claire left the pharmacy that afternoon with a shattered soul and an empty purse. The envelope that held her entire month's salary had been turned into medicine for a stranger. $847 that could have saved her family had now saved the life of a homeless man. She didn't know if she felt pride or despair. Perhaps she felt both at the same time, tearing her chest in opposite directions. She walked through the neighborhood streets like a ghost, not really seeing anything around her. People hurried past, each with their own problems, with no idea of the silent tragedy unfolding inside that woman in the worn-out uniform. Claire had just made the most important decision of her life, and now she would have to live with the consequences. The 48 hours were ticking down, and she had no idea how she would get $1,200. When she arrived home, she found Michael and Laura playing in the small yard with Mrs. Davis. The children ran to hug her as they always did. "Grandma, you're late today." Laura clung to her waist, and Michael showed her a new drawing he had made. Claire hugged them both tightly, breathing in the smell of cheap soap in their hair. How could she tell them that in 2 days they might lose this house? How could she explain that she had chosen to save a stranger instead of protecting their home? Mrs. Davis noticed something was wrong in Claire's eyes. After the children went back to playing, she pulled her friend aside. "What happened, dear? You look pale." Claire sat down in an old chair and told her everything in a low voice, tears streaming silently down her face. The old man at the pharmacy, the expensive medicine, the impossible choice she made. Mrs. Davis remained silent for a long moment, processing the information. "Claire, you did what your heart told you to do. God will reward you for this, you'll see." But Claire shook her head bitterly. "Mrs. Davis, I need $1,200 in 48 hours or I'll be evicted. Where is God in this? I saved a life, but now I'm going to destroy the lives of my grandchildren." The neighbor held Claire's rough hands in hers. "You haven't destroyed anything. You showed those children what it means to do the right thing, even when it costs you everything." That night, Claire barely slept. She stared at the stained ceiling, listening to Michael and Laura breathing peacefully beside her. They slept in each other's arms as always, oblivious to the approaching storm. Claire thought about waking them up and explaining the situation. But how do you explain to a 7- and 9-year-old that their grandmother chose a stranger over them? They wouldn't understand. She barely understood it herself. At 4:30 in the morning, the alarm went off as always. Claire got up, made coffee, left the affectionate note. But this time, as she left the house, she looked back for a little longer. She memorized every detail of that simple but beloved place. The peeling door, the small window with its patched curtain, the clothesline with the children's little outfits. All of it might not be theirs in less than 2 days. On the crowded bus, Claire considered all possibilities. Could she ask for an advance at work? She had already tried last month, and they had refused. Could she sell something? The old TV was worthless. The simple cell phone might fetch $100. Could she borrow from acquaintances? All her acquaintances were as poor as she was. The reality was cruel. There was no way out. She had made a noble decision that would cost her everything. At the hospital, while scrubbing the corridor floors, Claire was approached by a nurse who had never spoken to her before. "You're Claire, right? The woman from the pharmacy?" Claire stopped, confused. How did this nurse know about that? The young woman showed her phone, where the video of Claire leaving the pharmacy in tears was being shared thousands of times. "You're a hero. What you did was beautiful." But Claire didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a fool. During her lunch break, Claire tried to call the landlord, Mr. Henderson. She wanted to beg for more time, to explain the situation, to promise she would pay as soon as she could. But the secretary was cold. Mr. Henderson made it clear, 48 hours or eviction. no exceptions. Claire hung up the phone with trembling hands. The clock was still ticking, and she was running out of options, getting closer to the abyss. In the afternoon, at the school where she worked, the lunch ladies were talking about the viral video of the cleaner who had saved a homeless man. Claire listened in silence, cleaning the cafeteria tables. They didn't know they were talking about her. "What a brave woman," one said. "But what a fool too, right? Who in her situation would give all their money to a stranger?" Claire felt a stab in her chest. A fool. That's what everyone would think. A fool who made the wrong choice. That night, returning from her third job, Claire found Mrs. Davis waiting at the door with a worried expression. Michael asked, "Why you're so sad?" Laura said she wants to give you her piggy bank. It has $20 in it. They know something is wrong. Claire broke down. She sat on the steps of the house and cried for the second time that day. $20 from a child's piggy bank. That was all anyone could offer to help her. Inside, Claire told her grandchildren. Not all the details, but enough for them to understand. Grandma did something that seemed right, but it might have bad consequences for us. We might have to leave this house for a while. Michael, at 9 years old, with eyes too wise for his age, held her hand. "Grandma, you always say that what's right is right, no matter the cost. We'll be okay anywhere, as long as we're together." Laura, with her 7 years and huge heart, hugged Claire around the neck. "Did Grandma save someone? Then Grandma is a hero. My teacher says heroes always suffer before they win." Claire couldn't answer. She just hugged her 2 grandchildren with all her strength, wishing that hug could protect them from what was to come. But hugs don't pay rent. Hugs don't prevent evictions. And time was still running out. That would be the last full night they would have in that house. Claire lay down with the children, one on each side, and stayed awake until dawn, watching their faces as they slept. She memorized every detail. The way Michael furrowed his brow even in his sleep. The way Laura clutched her worn-out teddy bear. These were the only treasures Claire had, and she was about to lose them for doing what she thought was right. The next morning, with only 24 hours left before the eviction, Claire made a desperate decision. She would sell everything she could. The old tube TV, the simple cell phone, a few kitchen utensils that had some value. She spent the morning going from thrift store to thrift store, from pawn shop to pawn shop. In the end, she managed to gather $320, not even a third of what she needed. Despair was beginning to turn into resignation. At her afternoon job at the school, Claire was called to the principal's office. Her heart raced. Were they going to fire her? Not now, not when she needed it most. But when she entered the office, she found something unexpected. 3 teachers were there, and one of them was holding an envelope. "Claire, we saw the video. We know what you did. We took up a collection among the staff. It's not much, but we want to help." It was $450. Claire was speechless. Tears streamed down her face as she held the envelope as if it were the most precious treasure in the world. I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to." The principal interrupted with a gentle smile. "You've worked here for 5 years, always dedicated, always kind to the children. And what you did in that pharmacy was extraordinary. Let us give back a little of the kindness you spread every day." But even with that, Claire was still far from the $1,200. In the afternoon, while cleaning an empty classroom, Claire did the math in her head. $320 from selling her belongings, $450 from the teacher's collection, $200 left from her salary, total $970. She was short $230. So close, yet still not enough. And time was running out. The landlord would arrive the next morning at 8 o'clock to carry out the eviction if the full amount wasn't paid. Then something extraordinary happened. The video of Claire at the pharmacy had gone national. Millions of people had watched, cried, and shared it. Journalists began looking for her. A reporter from a local TV channel got her contact information through the school principal. "Mrs. Johnson, the entire country is talking about you, about your kindness. Can we do a story? People want to help." But Claire, humble as always, refused. "I didn't do it for attention. I just did what was right." However, the reporter insisted. She explained that many people wanted to donate money, wanted to help the woman who had touched their hearts. Claire finally agreed, not for herself, but for her grandchildren. If there was a chance to save their home, she had to try. The story aired that night on the local news. In 15 minutes, they showed the full picture. Claire, a cleaner for 30 years, grandmother to 2 children, who had donated her entire salary to save a homeless man and was now about to be evicted. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Social media exploded. An online fundraiser was created by volunteers. In 2 hours, they had already raised $5,000. In 4 hours, $10,000. People weren't just donating money. They were sending emotional messages saying that Claire had restored their faith in humanity. Business owners offered jobs. People offered homes. The entire country united around the humble cleaner who had made the most difficult and noble choice possible. But Claire knew none of this. She didn't have internet at home, no data on her phone. She didn't follow social media. She spent that night awake, holding her grandchildren, waiting for the dawn that would bring the eviction. At 3 in the morning, Mrs. Davis knocked on the door, breathless, holding her cell phone. "Claire, Claire, you have to see this. You're famous. The whole country is talking about you. There's already $15,000 in an online fundraiser." Claire couldn't believe what she was hearing. It had to be a mistake, but it wasn't a mistake. The next morning at 7 o'clock, 1 hour before the eviction, the organizer of the online fundraiser appeared at Claire's house with an envelope and a contract. "Mrs. Johnson, $23,000 have been raised. After paying the overdue rent, the rest is yours. The whole country was moved by your story." Claire collapsed in tears. She couldn't process it. How was it possible? How had an act of kindness turned into this? At 8 o'clock sharp, Mr. Henderson arrived with the bailiff to carry out the eviction. He knocked on the door arrogantly, already preparing the papers. But when Claire opened the door, she was calm. "Mr. Henderson, here is the full amount for the overdue rent, $1,200. She handed him the counted money. The man was stunned, clearly disappointed that he couldn't evict her. He took the money and left without a word, frustrated at not being able to exercise his petty power over the weak. But what Claire didn't know yet was that this story was just beginning, because while she was celebrating saving her home with the help of thousands of kind strangers, someone was watching everything very closely. A 68-year-old man, now dressed in an Italian-tailored suit, sitting in a mansion in an upscale neighborhood, watching the news report about the cleaner who had saved his life. Edward Sterling, the billionaire founder of the health farm chain, was sipping his morning coffee as tears streamed down his aged face. He called his personal assistant immediately. "Find this woman, Claire Johnson. I need to meet her in person and prepare the lawyers. We have a lot of work to do." The assistant, accustomed to his boss's unusual requests, quickly took notes. "Sir, what do you intend to do?" Edward looked out his office window, watching the city wake up below. "I'm going to do what should have been done a long time ago. I'm going to show the world that true kindness still exists and that it will always be rewarded." For 15 years, Edward Sterling had been conducting his humanity tests. He would disguise himself as a homeless man and go to his own pharmacies, pretending he couldn't afford expensive medicine. He wanted to know if genuine compassion existed in the world. He wanted to find people who would do the right thing even when it was costly. In all those years, only 3 people had helped him. And none of them had sacrificed everything like Claire did. He had seen wealthy people look at him with disgust. He had seen employees of his own companies treat him with contempt. He had seen society turn its back on someone who appeared to have nothing. But Claire was different. She had nothing, was literally hours from losing everything, and yet she chose to save his life. That wasn't just kindness, it was heroism in its purest form. And Edward was determined to reward it in a way the entire country would remember. Meanwhile, in the simple house on the outskirts of the city, Claire was sitting on the old sofa, holding the envelope with the money left over from the fundraiser. $21,000, more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. Mrs. Davis was by her side, and the children were playing in the yard, finally relieved to see their grandmother smiling. "What are you going to do with this money, Claire?" The cleaner looked at the envelope for a long moment before answering. "I'm going to save it for Michael and Laura's education, for when they go to college, so they can have chances I never had. And I'm going back to work tomorrow, just like I always have." Mrs. Davis shook her head in disbelief. "After all this, you're not even going to take a day off?" Claire smiled with the humility that defined her. "Rest is a luxury, Mrs. Davis. I'm a cleaner. It's what I know how to do. And a lot of people are depending on me." If she had imagined that the person depending on her most now was a 68-year-old billionaire who saw in her the salvation of his own tired soul, Claire would have thought it was crazy. But life has its ironies. Sometimes we save someone without knowing who we're saving. And sometimes, in saving someone, we end up saving ourselves. Claire's story was just beginning, and what was to come next would change not only her life, but the lives of thousands. If this story is moving you, don't forget to leave a like and share it with someone special, because stories like this need to be told. Stories like this remind us that there is still hope in this world. And keep watching, because what happens in the next chapters will leave you speechless. A week had passed since Claire was saved by the miracle of the online fundraiser. The house was secure, the grandchildren were happy, and she had returned to her usual routine, waking up at 4:30, 3 jobs, 14 hours of work a day. For Claire, everything was returning to normal. But what she didn't know was that nothing would ever be normal again, because on that Monday morning, something extraordinary was about to happen. It was 8 o'clock when Claire heard the sound of cars stopping in front of her house. These weren't ordinary cars. It was the unmistakable sound of powerful engines, heavy doors closing with German precision. She was preparing the children's breakfast when she heard firm knocks on the door. Mrs. Davis, who was visiting, went to the window and nearly fainted. "Claire, there are 3 black Mercedes, men in suits. What's happening?" Claire felt her heart pound. She opened the door slowly, and what she saw made her question if she was still dreaming. 5 men in impeccable suits were standing on the sidewalk, and in the center of them, a 68-year-old gentleman, elegantly dressed with perfectly combed gray hair and eyes she recognized immediately. They were the same eyes as the homeless man she had saved at the pharmacy, but now there was nothing homeless about him. He radiated power, wealth, authority. "Mrs. Johnson?" The voice was soft but firm. Claire just nodded, unable to speak. The man approached and extended his hand. "My name is Edward Sterling. I'm the founder of the health farm chain, and you saved my life a week ago." Claire was paralyzed. She looked at the man, then at the luxury cars, then at the bodyguards, trying to process what was happening. The homeless man was a billionaire? This couldn't be real. Edward saw the confusion on her face and smiled gently. "May I come in? I have a lot to explain." Claire, still in shock, made way. The neighbors were starting to come out of their houses, curious about the unusual commotion. Mrs. Davis held on to Michael and Laura so the adults could talk. Inside the humble home, Edward looked around with respect. noticing every detail of the simple but clean and lovingly organized place. "Mrs. Johnson, please, sit down. What I'm about to tell you might be hard to believe." Edward took a deep breath before he began. 15 years ago, after my wife passed away from cancer, I fell into a deep depression. I had built a pharmaceutical empire, had billions in the bank, but I felt empty. I started to question if genuine kindness still existed in the world, if people helped each other out of compassion or just for personal gain. Claire listened in silence, still processing. So I started my humanity tests. I would disguise myself as a homeless man and go to my own pharmacies, pretending I couldn't afford expensive medicine. I wanted to see if anyone would help me when I seemed to have nothing to offer in return. In 15 years, I visited hundreds of pharmacies across the country. And do you know how many people truly helped me? Only 3. Until you. Edward's voice trembled as he said this, his emotions finally surfacing. But none of the 3 did what you did, Claire. The others gave me a few dollars out of their own pockets. You gave me everything, literally everything you had. You were hours away from being evicted with your grandchildren, and yet you chose to save a stranger's life. You didn't even hesitate. I saw it in your eyes. You didn't think about the cost. You only thought that a life was at stake. Edward stood up and walked to the small window, looking out at the little yard where the children were playing. Do you know what that showed me, Claire? That heroism still exists in this world, that there are still people who do the right thing even when it costs them everything. You restored my faith in humanity. And now, he turned to face her directly, I want to repay you. But I need you to let me do this. I need you to accept my gratitude, because if you don't, you'll ruin everything. You'll ruin the beauty of what you did. Claire finally found her voice, but it was shaky. Mr. Sterling, I didn't help expecting anything in return. I helped because it was the right thing to do. If I accept your reward, it will seem like I did it for personal gain. And it wasn't like that. I swear it wasn't. Tears started streaming down Claire's face. Edward came closer and, surprisingly, held her rough hands in his. I know, Claire, I know you didn't do it for gain. That's exactly why you deserve to be rewarded. Listen, Edward continued, I've already decided what I'm going to do, but before I execute my plan, I need you to agree to one thing. He paused dramatically. I want to create a permanent social program at the pharmacy in your neighborhood. Free medicine for low-income families, subsidized medical consultations, everything necessary so that no one ever has to choose between buying medicine and buying food again. But I will only do this if you also agree to be helped. If you refuse, I'll cancel everything. Claire was stunned. That's emotional blackmail. Edward smiled. It is, but it's for a good cause. You can't take care of anyone if you're drowning yourself, Claire. You work 14 hours a day and can barely pay your bills. How long until your body gives up? How long until you're no longer here to take care of Michael and Laura? You need help just as much as those families do, and I need you to accept that. At that moment, all the pain from years of struggle came pouring out. Claire broke down. She began to cry uncontrollably, deep sobs shaking her entire body. I'm so tired, she admitted between tears. I'm so tired of fighting. I don't know if I can go on. I'm afraid of failing my grandchildren. I'm afraid of not being enough. I promised my daughter I would take care of them, but I don't know if I can. Edward, that powerful man who commanded an empire, knelt beside Claire and hugged her like a father would hug a daughter. You haven't failed. You are the strongest person I've ever met. You saved my life when you were about to lose everything. If that's not strength, I don't know what is. And now you're going to let me repay you, not for you, but for Michael and Laura. For all the people you will still help with your kindness. Please, Claire, let me do this. Claire finally nodded through her sobs. Edward stood up and called one of his assistants, who entered with a folder of documents. "Claire, as of today, you will no longer work as a cleaner. I'm creating a special position for you, coordinator of the Claire Johnson Kindness Program. Your job will be to supervise the social program we will implement in 50 pharmacies across the country. A salary of $10,000 a month, a formal contract, full benefits. You will help thousands of families just like yours." "Furthermore," Edward continued, pulling another envelope from the folder, "this house you live in has been purchased in your name. You will never pay rent again, and this is a $500,000 education fund for Michael and Laura. They will be able to study at the best schools and universities in the country. Your daughter would be proud." Claire couldn't stop crying. It was too much. It was impossible. It was a miracle she didn't deserve, but Edward wasn't finished. "And there's one more thing. Remember the landlord who was going to evict you, Mr. Henderson?" Claire nodded, confused about where this was going. "We discovered that he owns 20 properties in the area, and all the tenants are poor like you. He charges exorbitant rents and evicts without mercy. I've just bought all 20 of his properties, and now I'm going to cut the rents in half and give fair contracts to every family. Mr. Henderson won't be able to exploit anyone anymore." Claire looked at that man, that billionaire who had disguised himself as a homeless person to test humanity, and she realized she hadn't just saved his life in that pharmacy. She had saved his soul. She had shown him that it was still worth believing in people. And now he was using all his power and wealth to spread that kindness throughout the world. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever witnessed. "There's one last thing," Edward said, his voice softening. "I want you to know that I'm not doing this out of guilt or obligation. I'm doing it because you inspired me. You showed me that one act of kindness can change everything, and now I want to pay it forward. I want every person who is helped by our program to know your story. I want them to see that a humble cleaner changed the entire country with one brave choice." Outside, the neighbors were gathering. Mrs. Davis had told everyone who the man in the luxury cars was. The news spread like wildfire. The homeless man Claire had saved was a billionaire, and he was there to reward her. People started to cry, to applaud. Children waved curiously. It was as if the whole community was celebrating that impossible moment, because it wasn't just Claire's victory. It was the victory of kindness over selfishness, of hope over despair. Michael and Laura ran into the house, curious. Seeing their grandmother crying, they grew worried. "Grandma, why are you crying?" Claire hugged them tightly. "These are happy tears, my loves, very happy tears. Grandma won't have to work so much anymore. We're going to be okay. We're finally going to be okay." Edward watched the scene with tears in his own eyes. This was the beauty he'd been searching for 15 years. This was worth every second of his mission. 2 weeks later, Edward organized a national press conference. Journalists from all over the country were invited to witness the official launch of the Claire Johnson Kindness Program. The event was to be held at the very neighborhood pharmacy where it all began. Claire was nervous, wearing new clothes that Edward had insisted on buying for her. She had never spoken in public. She had never been the center of attention. And now the entire country would be watching. When Edward stepped up to the makeshift microphone in front of the pharmacy, hundreds of people were present. Neighborhood residents, journalists, TV cameras, even a few politicians hoping to cash in on the positive publicity. But Edward began his speech by looking only at Claire, who was sitting in the front row next to Michael and Laura. 15 years ago, I lost my wife to cancer, and with her, I lost my faith in humanity. I began to question if people still cared about one another. So I created a test. I disguised myself as a homeless man and went to my own pharmacies, pretending I didn't have money for vital medicines. I wanted to see if someone would help me when I seemed to have nothing to offer. In 15 years, hundreds of pharmacies, thousands of people walked past me. Only 3 helped me, until I met Claire Johnson. Edward pointed to her, and all the cameras turned. Claire lowered her head, uncomfortable with the attention. Claire didn't just help me. She gave me everything. Her entire month's salary. She was hours away from being evicted with her grandchildren, but she still chose to save a stranger's life. She didn't know who I was. She didn't expect a reward. She did it because it was right, and in that moment, she didn't just save my life. She saved my soul. She showed me that true kindness still exists in this world, that there are still heroes among us, and this hero was wearing a cleaner's uniform. The crowd applauded emotionally. Many were crying. Edward waited for the silence to return. That is why today I am proud to announce the Claire Johnson Kindness Program. Starting now, 50 health farm pharmacies across the country will offer free medicine to low-income families, subsidized medical consultations, discounted exams, all so that no one ever has to choose between health and food again. And Claire will be the coordinator of this program, using her life experience to help those who need it most. But Claire stood up at that moment, surprising everyone. She walked to the microphone, her legs trembling, her heart racing. Edward gave her the space with an encouraging smile. Claire looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at her reflection in the phones of hundreds of people recording, and for the first time in her life, she spoke her truth for the whole world to hear. I'm not a hero. I'm just a cleaner, a grandmother who did what anyone should do. When I saw that gentleman struggling in the pharmacy, I didn't think, I just acted, because his life was worth more than any money. And if I had to do it again, even knowing I would lose my home, I would, because that's how we should live, taking care of each other. It doesn't matter if we're rich or poor. It doesn't matter if we have a lot or a little. What matters is that we do the right thing, even when it's costly. Claire's voice was firm now, gaining confidence. I spent my whole life being invisible, cleaning floors that no one looked at, working in places where people didn't even answer my good morning. And that's okay. I didn't do my job to be seen. I did it because it was my duty, because that's how I supported my grandchildren. But now, for the first time, people are seeing me. And you know what I want you to see? That every person has value. The homeless man on the street, the cleaner in the hospital, the garbage collector. All of us have value. Claire turned to Edward with tears in her eyes. Mr. Sterling gave me an opportunity I never imagined having, but it wasn't just the money, it was the respect. He saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. And now I want to pay that forward. I want every person helped by our program to know that they have value, that they deserve dignity, that they are not alone, because I know what it's like to be alone, and no one should feel that way. The crowd erupted in applause. People were openly crying. Journalists scribbled furiously. Michael and Laura ran to hug their grandmother, proud of this brave woman. Edward hugged Claire like a father hugs a daughter. "You are the wisest person I have ever known," he whispered, "and we are going to change this country together." Claire nodded, feeling for the first time in her life that she had a purpose greater than just survival. But as the celebration unfolded, a bitter figure watched from a distance. Mr. Henderson, the former landlord, stood across the street with an expression of pure hatred. He had lost all his rental properties, lost his source of easy income from extracting money from poor people, and all because of that insignificant cleaner who was now being treated like a queen. He spat on the ground in contempt and walked away, vowing that this story was not over. Edward, however, was prepared for this. He knew that kindness always attracts envy, that doing good always bothers those who profit from evil. That's why he had hired security for Claire and her family. That's why he had lawyers ready for any problem. He would let nothing destroy this opportunity to spread kindness in the world. Claire had lit a flame, and he would ensure that flame became a wildfire of compassion. In the following days, Claire's story dominated the news. Newspapers across the country published articles about the cleaner who saved a billionaire. TV shows invited her for interviews. She became a national symbol of kindness and sacrifice. Schools began to use her story in lessons on values. Churches mentioned her in sermons. Claire Johnson, the formerly invisible cleaner, was now known in every corner of the country. But what mattered most was the practical impact. In the 50 pharmacies in the program, thousands of people began to be served. Mothers got medicine for their sick children without spending their food money. The elderly received treatments that were previously impossible. People with chronic illnesses received continuous medication for free, and each of them received a pamphlet telling Claire's story, reminding them that this help existed because a poor woman chose to save a stranger, even when it cost her everything. The program inspired other business owners. Supermarket owners started free food basket programs. Private schools offered scholarships to underprivileged children. Transport companies created free passes for the unemployed to attend interviews. It was as if Claire's kindness had created a chain reaction across the country, one courageous act multiplying into millions of small acts of compassion. Michael and Laura were enrolled in one of the best private schools in the city. They had new uniforms, complete school supplies, a full lunchbox. But Claire made sure they never forgot where they came from. You have privileges now that most children don't. That doesn't make you better. It makes you responsible for helping those in need, for not becoming people who ignore the suffering of others. The children listened seriously, absorbing this vital lesson. Edward visited Claire weekly to discuss the program's expansion. They had developed a genuine friendship based on mutual respect. He saw in her the daughter he never had. She saw in him the father she had lost young. It was an unlikely connection between a billionaire and a former cleaner, but it was real. It proved that true relationships transcend social class, money, and status. It proved that humanity recognizes humanity regardless of anything else. One day during a meeting, Edward made a surprising proposal. Claire, I want to expand the program to 200 pharmacies, and I want you to be the executive director, not just a coordinator, a director, with decision-making power, your own team, a multi-million-dollar budget. You have the life wisdom that no MBA can teach. You know what people need because you lived that reality. You are the perfect person to lead this. Claire was stunned. I can barely read properly, Edward. How am I going to run a program of this size? But Edward shook his head firmly. We'll get you private tutors. You'll learn everything you need. And what you already know, your empathy, your compassion, your understanding of human suffering, that's something no one can teach. You were born with it, and that's what makes you special. Trust me, you can do this. Claire took a deep breath and accepted the challenge. If Edward believed in her, she would try to believe in herself. Claire's transformation in the following months was impressive. She had tutors for English, math, and management. She learned quickly, absorbing knowledge with the hunger of someone who had been deprived of education her entire life. She discovered she was intelligent, capable, competent. The decades of hard labor had hidden a potential that could now finally flourish. She was becoming the woman she always had the potential to be, but whom poverty had never allowed. And so, the climax of Claire's story was not just about being saved. It was about discovering who she really was. It was about turning tragedy into triumph, pain into purpose, invisibility into impact. Claire Johnson, who had spent 52 years being ignored by the world, was now changing the entire country. And the most beautiful part was that she remained humble, kind, and compassionate. Success hadn't changed her. It had only amplified what she had always been, a light in the midst of darkness. 6 months had passed since that transformative day at the pharmacy. It was a sunny Saturday morning when Claire woke up in the house that was now officially hers. There was no more anxiety about late rent, no more fear of eviction. She looked around the renovated bedroom with freshly painted walls, new but simple furniture, clean curtains letting the sunlight stream in. It was surreal to think about how her life had changed in such a short time. Michael and Laura were already awake, making breakfast. They had learned to be more independent, but they still insisted on preparing breakfast for their grandmother every Saturday. Claire came down the renewed stairs to find the table set with bread, fruit, and fresh juice. "Good morning, Grandma." Laura ran to hug her. Michael, now almost 10 and becoming more mature, smiled proudly at the table they had prepared. These simple moments were everything to Claire. That afternoon, Claire had an important meeting. The Claire Johnson Kindness Program was expanding to 200 pharmacies, as Edward had proposed. She was now the executive director, leading a team of 15 people, managing a multi-million-dollar budget. And most impressively, she was doing it brilliantly. The private tutors Edward had hired had helped, but Claire's true strength came from her life experience, her deep empathy, her visceral understanding of what poor people needed. During the meeting at the health farm office, Claire presented the numbers from the last 6 months. 150,000 people served, $3 million in medicine distributed for free, 500 families who didn't have to choose between food and medicine, 200 lives saved directly thanks to the program. They were just numbers on a page, but Claire saw faces behind each statistic. She saw relieved mothers, grateful elderly people, children who received treatment. Every number was a story of restored dignity. Edward watched the presentation with tears of pride in his eyes. Claire had exceeded all expectations. She wasn't just a beneficiary of his kindness. She was an equal partner in this mission to spread compassion across the country. "Claire," he said when the meeting ended, "you know that when I gave you this position, many people doubted it. Company directors said a functionally illiterate former cleaner couldn't lead something so big. I proved them wrong, but actually you were the one who proved them wrong." Claire smiled with that humility that defined her. "I'm just doing what anyone would do if they had the opportunity, Edward. Helping those in need. It's as simple as that." But Edward shook his head. "It's not simple. And it's not just anyone. It's you. With your empathy, your dedication, your huge heart, you turned an idea into a national movement. We already have business owners from other sectors wanting to create programs inspired by yours. You are changing the country, Claire. Literally." That evening, Claire was invited to a special dinner at Edward's mansion. He wanted to celebrate the program's success and also make an important announcement. When Claire arrived with Michael and Laura, she was surprised to see dozens of people present: journalists, business leaders, politicians, and most importantly, ordinary people who had benefited from the program, mothers who got medicine for their asthmatic children, elderly people who received treatment for diabetes. Every face had a story of gratitude. Edward called for silence and invited Claire to the center of the hall. "Friends, today we celebrate 6 months of the Claire Johnson Kindness Program, but we also celebrate something bigger, the proof that genuine kindness still exists and that it has transformative power. Claire saved me when I was a homeless stranger, and now she is saving thousands. That is why I am proud to announce the creation of the Claire Johnson Foundation, with an initial endowment of $50 million dedicated to spreading kindness throughout the country." Claire was speechless. $50 million, a foundation with her name. She, who months ago didn't even have $1,200 to pay the rent. The tears came uncontrollably. Edward hugged her as he always did, like a father hugging a daughter. "You deserve this, and so much more. And this foundation will ensure that your legacy continues for generations, that millions of people will be touched by your kindness. Even when we are no longer here, the Claire Johnson Foundation will continue to spread compassion." One of the program's beneficiaries asked to speak. She was a 40-year-old woman, a mother of 3. "Mrs. Johnson, "You don't know this, but you saved my daughter's life. She has severe asthma, and I didn't have money for her medicine. Because of your program, she got free treatment. Today, she is healthy, playing, living like a child should. You are my hero, the hero of so many mothers who were as desperate as I was." Claire hugged the woman and cried with her. More people shared their stories. An elderly man who got his heart medication, a young woman who got free contraceptives, a man with Parkinson's who received continuous treatment. Each story was a testament to the impact of that one act of kindness Claire had performed 6 months ago. An impossible choice that saved a stranger and, unknowingly, saved thousands. It was proof that no act of kindness is too small, that everything multiplies when done with a pure heart. Michael and Laura watched their grandmother being celebrated with pride on their faces. They had learned the most important lesson, that true wealth is not in money, but in the impact we have on the lives of others. That doing the right thing is always worth it, even when it's costly. That an ordinary person can change the world if they have the courage to act when others remain indifferent. These children would grow up with these values, perpetuating their grandmother's legacy of kindness. At the end of the night, Edward and Claire were left alone in the mansion's garden, looking at the stars. "You know," Edward said, breaking the silence, "I spent 15 years testing humanity. I found so much indifference, so much selfishness. I was on the verge of losing faith completely. And then you appeared, a poor cleaner who gave me everything without hesitation. You didn't just save my life that day. You saved my soul. You showed me that it's still worth believing in people." Claire looked at the man who had become like a father to her. "And you showed me that I have value. My whole life I was treated as invisible. You saw me. You gave me an opportunity. You made me believe I could be more than I thought possible. We saved each other, Edward. And now we are saving others together. It's beautiful how that works, how kindness begets kindness, how one act multiplies into millions." The two stood in silence, absorbing that profound truth. 3 months later, Claire received a letter from a woman in another state. The letter read, "Mrs. Johnson, I saw your story on TV and was so inspired. Last week I saw a man collapse on the street with no money for an ambulance. I used all the money I had to call a private one. I later found out he was an important businessman testing people's kindness, just like what happened to you. He rewarded me, and now I'm starting a food donation program in my city. It's all because of you. Thank you for inspiring me." Claire read the letter, crying with emotion. The chain of kindness was spreading. Her act had inspired someone else, who would inspire others, who would inspire still more. It was like throwing a stone into a lake and watching the ripples expand infinitely. She realized then that this was the true legacy, not the money, not the foundation, not the fame, but the inspiration, showing millions of people that doing the right thing still matters, that kindness still wins, that it's worth being human. A year after that day in the pharmacy, Claire was giving a lecture at a university. Hundreds of students filled the auditorium to listen to the woman who had become a national symbol of kindness and sacrifice. "I was invisible," she began. "I spent 52 years cleaning floors where important people walked without seeing me. I was just another poor cleaner trying to survive. But I learned something fundamental. It doesn't matter who you are or how much money you have. What matters is what you do when no one is looking." That day in the pharmacy, I had an impossible choice: save a stranger or save my family from eviction. And I chose to save the stranger, not because I was a hero, but because I couldn't live with myself knowing I had let someone die when I could have done something. And you know what happened? By saving that stranger, I ended up saving my family in a way I never imagined. The kindness came back multiplied. It always does. Maybe not in the way we expect, but it always comes back. The students listened in absolute silence, many with tears in their eyes. Claire continued, "You who are here are privileged. You have education, opportunities. Many of you come from families with resources. That doesn't make you better than anyone. It makes you responsible. Responsible for using your privileges to help those in need. Don't turn your back on suffering. Don't ignore the invisible ones. Because I was invisible, and someone saw me. And that changed everything. Be the people who see the invisible." After the lecture, dozens of students came up to thank her and share how her story had inspired them. Many committed to doing volunteer work. Others promised to create social projects. Some cried, saying they had lost faith in humanity, but Claire had restored it. She hugged each one, seeing in those young faces the future of a more compassionate country. Perhaps this was her greatest achievement, not just helping thousands directly, but inspiring millions to do the same. Edward, watching from a distance, smiled with satisfaction. His humanity test had found the answer he was looking for. Yes, genuine kindness still existed in the world. It was alive in Claire, and now it was spreading like fire, touching hearts, transforming lives, changing mindsets. He had found his hero, and she was proving every day that it was worth believing, that it was worth those 15 years of searching, because one person like Claire was worth millions. That night, Claire returned home to the house that was now hers, with no fear of eviction, no anxiety about rent. Michael and Laura were doing their homework, doing well in the private school they now attended. She made a simple cup of tea and sat on the sofa, looking at old photos. Photos of when she was a young cleaner. Photos of the daughter she had lost. Photos of her grandchildren as babies, and now photos in the newspapers, on TV, next to Edward inaugurating program pharmacies. Tears of gratitude streamed down Claire's face. She thought about everything she had been through, the decades of invisible work, the loss of her daughter, the struggle to raise her grandchildren alone, the despair of the eviction notice. And then that moment in the pharmacy, that impossible choice that changed everything. She had no regrets, not for a second, because from that choice, a movement of kindness was born that was transforming the country. From that choice, hope was born for thousands. From that choice, a legacy was born that would last for generations. This is the proof that a single act of kindness can change not just one life, but thousands. Claire was not rich in money when she made her choice, but she was rich in love, in compassion, in humanity. And in the end, those are the riches that truly matter. The riches that multiply when shared. The riches that transform the world. Claire Johnson, the formerly invisible cleaner, was now a shining light of hope in a world that so desperately needed her. If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, because maybe, just maybe, you'll inspire someone to be the next Claire, to make the difficult but right choice, to save a stranger even when it costs everything. And who knows, maybe that person will be saving you. That's how kindness works. It circulates, it multiplies, it returns. It always returns. It might take time, it might come in an unexpected way, but it always returns. Claire's story teaches us that no matter how invisible we are, how poor, how unimportant the world makes us feel, we all have the power to change lives. We all have the capacity to make choices that echo through eternity. All it takes is courage. All it takes is heart. All it takes is remembering that on the other side of every statistic, every number, every stranger, there is a life as precious as our own. And saving a life, even when it costs everything, will always be worth it. Until the next story. And remember, kindness always returns. It always wins. It's always worth it. Be the Claire in someone's life. Make the difficult but right choice, because in the end, when all else is gone, what remains is the impact we have on the lives of others. And that is the only legacy that truly matters. The only one that transcends time and touches eternity.